Hello, and welcome to yet another edition of the Infinite Monkeys podcast. If you've been listening for a while, you probably know the drill by now, but just in case, this is an educational podcast about football theory and philosophy using outside studies and sciences. Today, we're talking about goats. No, not the farm animal, the acronym for greatest of all time. This has been a really hot talking point ever since the Patriots beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl. Now that Tom Brady has 5 Super Bowl rings, everybody's pretty much accepted that he's the greatest of all time. And to be honest, that's really hard to argue with. I actually was going to title this episode, Is Tom Brady the Greatest of All Time? But I didn't want that to be too clickbaity because we're not actually going to answer the question. We're just going to talk about how to answer the question. And to do so, we're going to have to go into some pretty muddy philosophical waters, so please bear with me as I go way into the weeds with this. So the whole cliche with philosophy is that in like every Philosophy 101 class, the professor starts by putting a chair in the middle of the room. And he asks some poor unsuspecting student, hey, is this chair here? And the student goes, well, yeah, of course the chair is there. And he says, how do you know the chair is there? And the student says, well, I can see it, I can feel it, I can sit on it. I've got all this evidence that says this chair exists. What is this? This is the most ridiculous question ever. And the professor uses that example to illustrate one of the core questions of philosophy, which is how do we know anything is real? How do we know we're not just dreaming or we're not just plugged into some crazy matrix that's making up all of our memories and experiences and feelings and emotions for us? See, I told you we were going way in the weeds with this. But the study of knowledge, or the study of like how we can really know anything for certain or what knowledge even is called epistemology. And for a long time, the most widely accepted model of epistemology came from Socrates, way back in ancient Greece. And what Socrates said is you can define knowledge if you have 3 things: justified, true, belief. So you can't know something if you don't even believe it, right? If I don't think that the sky is purple, I can't say, I know the sky is purple. I don't even believe that the sky is purple. You need to have truth to it, right? If the sky isn't purple, I can't know that the sky is purple because it's not. I'm wrong about that. There's clearly something else that I'm unaware of, like my own colorblindness or something, making it so that I don't have knowledge. And then the last and probably the hardest part is justification. I need to have good reason to believe that the sky is blue and not purple. The fact that I can look at it and see that it's blue is a pretty good reason, but you need to have some sort of evidence backing up your claim. So the example we're going to be working with today is a ship captain who is heading north, and he is pretty sure he's heading north because he looked at his compass and it said north. He believes he's heading north, obviously, and it's true, he does happen to be heading north. So you could safely say that that ship captain knows he's heading north. So fast forward through like 2 millennia of philosophy, and you get all the way to 1963, and this guy named Edmund Gettier. Gettier was teaching at the University of Massachusetts Amherst when he published a paper called Is Justified True Belief Knowledge? And the problem that Gettier had with that Socratic model is that justified true belief doesn't actually cover enough. It isn't strict enough, and you can get some examples through that model that aren't actually knowledge. And then he goes on to give an example. Now, we're going to stick with our own ship captain example just to keep it simple. But take the exact same situation. He's headed north. His compass says he's north. He thinks he's going north. But unbeknownst to him, his compass is actually broken. And by a sheer stroke of luck, it happens to be correctly pointing north. But in this situation, does our ship captain actually know that he's going north? After all, he thinks he's going north. His instrument that you can usually rely on says he's going north, and he's actually going north, but it appears that there's some information out there that the ship captain doesn't know, and it kind of defeats the whole idea of having this like certain knowledge. Now, when we're talking about sports, we don't need to like get all metaphysical about it, right? You can't say that, well, Tom Brady isn't good because actually we're in the Matrix and we're all dreaming this. But our ship captain and other Gettier cases, as they would come to be known, can actually be really useful to us in analysis. They highlight a very important distinction between 2 schools of thought, and I'm going to call them results-oriented thought and process-oriented thought. So results-oriented thought is taking a result, or like the thing that happens, and then using it to define the information that led up to that result, whereas process-oriented thought is using that information to determine the likelihood of a future result. So since I'm biased, I'll say that the Vikings play the Packers, and the Vikings win. So results-oriented thought would look at that result and then say, well, the Vikings clearly are better than the Packers. But process-oriented thought would look at that game and say, well, the Vikings played better than the Packers and therefore they won. And this is a very important distinction. So if you circle back to our Gettier case and look at our ship captain's assessment, and you look at the result of that assessment, you'll say, well, yeah, the ship captain is absolutely right. He thought he was going north, and he ended up being going north. What's the problem here? But process-oriented thought looks at how he got there, and that's the only way to determine the Gettier case, the only way to determine the problem that his compass is broken. And this is really important because in future situations where he's going to have to determine which direction he's going, he now has an unreliable piece of information that is embedded into his process. He could be going west and still think he's going north. His success is not repeatable. Similarly with our Vikings-Packers example, you can't really use one Vikings-Packers game to inform your prediction of the next Vikings-Packers game. You have to use the reasons that the Vikings beat the Packers and then assess if those are repeatable, not the result itself. In football and really in any science, any result that's worth examining has a whole bunch of factors that go into it. There's how well the quarterback played, how well the running back played, how well the defense played, if the coach made the right decisions, and so on and so on and so forth. If you just look at the blanket result, you're burning all of that information into a positive or negative, in a world where they're almost never all positive or negative. So every time you judge a team, or even worse, a player, by raw wins and losses, you're probably overlooking a negative thing they did in a win and a positive thing that they did in a loss. You're missing out on a whole bunch of information. Since it's all fresh in our minds, just look at Super Bowl 51. By pretty much every account, every way you can think of to measure quarterback play, Matt Ryan had a better game, but he still lost. Conversely, a lot of people would say Tom Brady actually didn't have that great of a game, but he still won, and he got his 5th Super Bowl ring because of it. Now, even if you don't agree with that premise that Tom Brady had a bad game in Super Bowl 51, you can still agree that it was possible for Tom Brady to have had a bad game and still won. Bad quarterbacks win games all the time. The Super Bowl isn't immune to that. And because that is a fact, that means that our process of judging quarterbacks by wins and losses is inherently flawed. It's our version of the broken compass. So the whole point of this argument and this podcast is not to say that Tom Brady isn't or is the greatest of all time. It's to say that if you are going to call him the greatest of all time, his 5 Super Bowl rings aren't the things that make him the greatest of all time. It's not the fact that he won all of those games that makes him the GOAT. It's the things he did to win all of those games that would make him the GOAT. And that's where your argument should lie. You just have to look at something beyond the overall results of games, because there's a lot going on in a football game that can't be captured by a simple binary result of win or loss. As always, thank you so much for listening to the Infinite Monkeys podcast. Again, as always, I have no idea when the next one of these is going to come out. Could be next week, could be in a month from now, could be never again. If you want to hear more of my beautiful voice talking about the Vikings, you can hear me on the Purple Journal podcast, which comes out every Thursday morning, Wednesday night-ish. And you probably already listened to that and are subscribed, and that's why these weird Infinite Monkey things are showing up on your podcasts app. I also write for purpleptsd.com, and I write a weekly article there, or if I don't write a weekly article, it'll be one of these. And my first article at Purple PTSD was actually about results-oriented thought, so this is a really awesome topic to me, and I feel really strongly about it. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.